So far what we've been talking about is looking at how people communicate in groups and personally. I want to sort of move us on into sort of the idea of how media and communications sort of affects our lives and how we use media and communications as people who are trying to gain knowledge as well as people who are trying to persuade others to do something or buy something. So first I want to focus a little bit on media effects, what media does. And when we think about mass communication, it's that idea of one to many. We sort of talked about this before. Media that is mediated, media that is put out there to do something, to inform someone. And there's a lot of discussion, especially early on in mass communication research, is whether an audience is passive or active. Are you just sitting back and taking what the media says and going with it, or are you actively engaging with the media? Early on, it was very much an idea of passive communications. As we've gotten more interactive technologies, we've definitely seen the research move more towards that active idea. As we go through today, I want you to think about, how much time do you really spend with media in a day? How much time, if you think about radio, television, books, internet, social media, how much time do you actually spend out of your day being engaged with mass communications? And then how does that sort of affect you? Think about, as we go through these theories, I really want you to think about what you do in your life. I think you'll find it very interesting. This is one of the things that made me stay in mass communications, is this idea of effect. There's sort of, like I said, two perspectives of media. There's the media effect and the media usage. So media effect, that passive, media usage meaning more of that active. Okay, so media effects is what we're going to look at today, sort of the study of the effect of the media and the message. And then next time we'll talk about uses and how people make decisions and choose media. So when we think about media effects, it sort of started back in the 40s with Lazarsfeld and some of the guys that we talked about before doing research around World War II, looking at how media was used to engage or brainwash people about what they should believe with the media, or with the war. So the first thing was sort of this magic bullet, also known as the hypodermic needle theory, where we said that the media gave everybody communication and it just sort of went straight into them. It was almost like a bullet straight into them, and that was the information they had. Or it was a needle straight into them from the mass media, and that was what they knew. Over time, we sort of moved from, it's this limited effects, so how limited is the effect of media, to more of a moderate, and then to more of a more powerful. And there's sort of different ideas behind all of these levels, and we won't get too much into them, but realize as time and mass communications has changed, there's definitely times when we've thought about there being limited effects, moderate effects, and more powerful effects. And you can see with some of the theories where some of these might fit in a little bit. The first theory that we'll see that I wanted to bring up was cultivation theory. And cultivation was Gerbner in 1980. And basically what cultivation said is you're exposed to the same messages that are going to produce common roles and common values. So basically, we cultivate society based on the media messages that are out there. And it really looked at sort of that high versus low TV watching. So high TV watching was, you're going to be much more influenced by the culture that's being perceived. So if the media is telling us all to wear trucker hats, we would all do it because we're high TV watching, where that exposure is showing us what common roles and common values to be somebody in society. A lot of critics came in and said, well, that sort of mainstreaming could be involved in this in terms of, what is mainstream outside of seeing mass communication, and then also resonance. What resonates with us versus what doesn't. A grandparent isn't going to take on trucker hats the way a teenager is when they see Ashton Kutcher wearing them. So the critics said, it's not just that perfect, what the media shows us is what we do. And so they sort of said there's this first order of cultivation theory and sort of this second order. So the first order of the stuff that really hits us hard, after 9/11, that patriotism we saw. We all had patriotism, the media was portraying that, and so that first order we were mainstreaming that idea. And then second order, what reaches us in different ways. Part of that somewhat stems off of this idea of spiral of silence as well. Noel Newman did some stuff in 73 and 80, but they basically said that the idea of communications is a spiral of silence, okay? And it sort of just builds up. And the more we hear about something in the media, and the more we see people supporting it, the less open we are going to be about deviating from it or not believing it, okay? We sort of this ubiquity to it. If everybody is saying, let's say if everybody's saying in the Olympics, for example, America should win, America should win, America should win. Maybe you grew up in China and you really like China sports, but you're in this media that's saying, and these people around you, everybody you're exposed to and talking to says, no, it's got to be the U.S., U.S. So whether you really want to vote, cheer for the U.S. or China, you're going to not openly express anything that deviates from that main opinion. So it's sort of this accumulation and buildup of information that makes you sort of become silent, okay? And it can be widespread. And a lot of this is, unifying people. And when you think about media effect, and when media is giving you and expressing tons of opinion, it's affecting others, they're unifying themselves, and then it's making everybody sort of go together. We sort of talked about groupthink, very similar to that sort of idea, where we don't want to go against the dominant opinion. We also have this third person effect when we talk about media and communications and effects. And I think you will see this as we talk about some of these things. When you think about yourself, it's sort of that third person effect in that it's going to influence, me more than them more than me. It's this perceptual hypothesis that it's going to be a greater effect on everyone else but me. People are going to take action toward the effect you think, but it's not going to be me. Okay, it's sort of this third person effect. And a lot of this has to deal with your social distance from people. When we talk about poverty, it's going to affect everybody but me. This economy is going to affect everybody but me, because in terms of social, what I see in the media, I'm not like some of the people they're showing. So it's them. And so the more we see that social distance between topics, the more we believe that third person effect. We also have this idea of media dependence. And so if we think about media effects and the fact that media is affecting how we think and how we believe, it also comes into how dependent are you on media. This theory sort of says that it's a very interactive process. Okay, and this has come out a little later, past the sort of spiral of silence and after the magic bullet back in the 40s. This is sort of moved into the 80s and 90s in terms of how dependent we are. And what research is showing is the more dependent on media, the greater the influence. Okay, so if I watch media and I watch the news about E. coli poisoning, the more I'm going to be worried about E. coli poisoning. The more I see reports on organic foods, the more I'm going to be influenced to buy organic foods. Okay, so we're saying the more dependent we are, the more we watch it, the more we need it for our information, the greater the influence. And if you think about people in some of that poor economic status, if they're getting all of their information from television and radio, they're influenced by that media. Okay, And the critics came in to say, is there an ideal level of media dependence? Should we have some dependence on media to get our information? Is that not what they're there for? Sort of that watchdog thing. And then it also says, is this theory overemphasizing the effect? Is there more to it than just being dependent on the media and that influencing us? Are there other things that sort of come into play based on our knowledge, our SES, some of those things? Is that going to affect how dependent we are on media? One theory that I've always been really intrigued by is sort of this uses and gratifications. And it really explains media effects in terms of function or use. So how we are influenced is how we are using the media. What are we using media for? So this is sort of one of those limited effects theories when we think about effects, because what the audience is doing with media, they are active. So it's not like the magic bullet where it's that high level of effect. This is sort of a limited effects. But it definitely comes into play when you think about how we use media and how it affects us personally. Basically what its uses and gratifications says is you're going to have some type of need. You're going to have motives in your life. And you're then going to say, okay, I need to meet this need. I have this motivation to figure this out. So maybe I'm hungry. And so I need to get food. So I'm motivated to get food. And so what I'll do is I'm going to come up with some type of activity. This can be pre-exposure, during, or post. This activity where I'm looking for something that is going to help me fill this need. And so I'm going to look for some type of media channel, media exposure that I'm going to use. And I use that based on previous exposure. So if I knew the white pages always helped me find the restaurant I wanted to go to, I'm going to go back to them. So that pre-exposure to it is going to help me decide which media to use. And then based on that, I will fulfill those gratifications. So this sort of, I use media to gratify my needs. So it's media use, but it's more of a media effect, because the media effect comes in as you've been successful, the media has done this for you before, so you're going to continue to go back to that media for this. So what uses and gratifications really says is that audience members have the motives to seek out media. Okay, it's more of a goal-directed behavior. And we're going to satisfy our needs by selecting a type of media. And a lot of this is going to go into your socio-psychological factors. And we're going to look at some of these here in a second in terms of, I always have somewhat related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Not necessarily the exact same, but very similar. In psychologically, what do we need and what media is going to help us fulfill that need. And media competes with other forms of communications in this. So like I said, it's that limited effects, because media is not the only place you might go. Right? This also says that people can be more influential than media. So this also, it is a media effects theory, but does border on that line of media use, because people are going to be more influential than media to some extent in this. And you'll see this here in a second. The uses and gratifications says there's several needs that we have to fulfill. First one is our entertainment need. We need something that is entertaining, that relaxes us. So when you get home and you've had a stressful day, you want something to make you laugh, so you might watch a sitcom. Okay? And so that's sort of that need that you have to have entertainment fulfilled. There's this idea of surveillance, needing to understand what's around us constantly. And so we look towards a specific media to help us understand what's around us, what's happening in the world. So we get that all of our surveillance needs fulfilled by a specific news station. Information, wanting to learn more things. You go and watch a YouTube video on how to bake cookies. If you really want to know how to bake cookies, you have this need for understanding how to make cookies. I'm planning my daughter's birthday party, and I'm trying to learn how to decorate. So I'm going to certain media to find ideas and information. Right? sort of, you also have this diversion. And you'll see this a lot of people, they just need diversion, a media reality check. And we see this a lot with mobile technologies these days. This research, uses and grats, really came around more with television, but it's been revived with the internet, and it's being even more revived with this sort of social media and mobile technology, because we really have this use of diversion. I was at something the other day, and I listened to someone saying how they're happy when their doctor doesn't get them right in, because they can sit there and do email and get things done. You see people on the bus not wanting to make eye contact, so they use media. They go into this sort of media reality. We also see it to escape, escape from the world, escape from our problems. People who don't want to deal with things will sort of go into and look at media. So if you're depressed, you don't want to deal with the world around you, you'll escape into looking at media, seeing other people. We have this idea of social interaction needs. So we want to be able to talk with somebody. A great example of this was early on with Dancing with the Stars, the first season. I remember I was in grad school, and I came into the office, and everybody was talking about it. They had watched it. And I felt left out. I could not interact with my peers because I hadn't watched it. So the next week I watched it because I had this need to be able to interact with the people around me, this social interaction that I wanted. So I watched it so I could have that social interaction. And very similar to sort of that parasocial interaction, feeling like you're interacting with people. Okay? Feel like you're interacting with the people on the show. This is sort of sometimes where we see people feeling like they know the newscaster or know the person on the sitcom. You know this person. You have a relationship with this person. This is where we see a lot of people getting stalkers in the media. A lot of actresses and actors getting, because people have this parasocial interaction. They think since you're in their living room every night showing their lives to you, that you understand them and you relate with this character. Some people see it as an identity. They help them define who they are. Again, some is just a pastime. We have it just playing in the background. And then some companionship. People who are, for lack of a better term, loners, are by themselves. They're going to have the television on for companionship. You could almost say dogs need companionship, and that's where all these dog television channels are coming out. But that's taking it to extreme. But you'll see people who, people in retirement homes, always will have their television on, sort of that companionship, somebody to be around them. The other theory that's really popular in mass communications and really popular in ag communications, we see a lot of studies done in ag communications around the next three sort of ideas and theories. And the first one is sort of this idea of agenda setting. And McCombs and Shaw sort of developed this and started publishing about this in the 70s. And what they said is what's most important today is based on media coverage. So, great example, when Bush Jr. was being elected, there was all of this uproar, I think it was him, about him being in a boat during war, or him smoking marijuana. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that we never would have known about if the media hadn't made us worry about it. Some people say that some of the issues with the economy are because the media portrayed this downtrodden economy, and they made people think, oh, there is this problem, so I'm going to have to think about this, and I'm going to pull in, tighten my bootstraps, and then that made the economy go worse. So it's sort of this agenda setting. They say, the most popular way to think of it is not what to think, but what to think about. So the media sets up this agenda. They serve as this gatekeeper, and that's one of the terms in the theory that you'll see a lot. They are the gatekeeper of information to the public. And so if public is only getting their information from the media, and the media is telling us we need to worry about this E. coli scare, or that all of a sudden eggs have too high of a cholesterol, It may have not been something that hit our radar before, but now we're going to worry about it because the media said we need to do this. And this is where a lot of times you see that sort of that media agenda versus the public agenda. We've got, the television, whether you want to watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, based on your political affiliation, they're putting out their media agenda. Even though journalists are supposed to be unbiased, there is this idea of media sets this agenda. And so we do a lot of ag communication studies looking at what kind of agenda is the media setting in terms of agricultural information, agricultural environmental issues. Some of the positive with this, it says that it's the attention on the audience interaction with media. So it's really looking at how there's this link between the media and the audience and sort of motivations. And it's got a lot of similar ideas, including this idea of priming, which we'll get to here in a second. So it has some value in that it is putting the media out there. But some of the critics have said, no, this is too situationally specific. A lot of the early stuff was on news and political campaigns. And so we're not looking at everything. It's very situational. And they also, say, is it truly the media as the gatekeepers, or is it the public opinion shaping the media? If you think about how media decide on stories, part of that is they're trying to decide what is going to be interesting to the public, or what is the public dealing with that they want to report on. So is that the public driving it, or is the media driving it? Personally, I think it's a little bit of both, and it really depends on sort of that issue that's being looked at. But there's definitely evidence that the media can set the agenda depending on certain things. As I said, it brings into this idea of priming, which is good. And priming sort of is grounded in cognitive psychology. And we've talked a little bit about cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk, when we get into persuasion, about need for cognition, need for understanding. Cognition really becomes important when we talk about communications. And I think that sort of ties us back into our roots in education as well. Priming says that there's this stimulus that's going to be a response. So if somebody keeps telling me that there's this egg issue, then I'm primed to start thinking about it more. And that's what puts it into my agenda. And it can be positive or negative in how it primes it to me. And a lot of times it can be short-lived. For example, the news comes on and says something about recalls in children's bedding in terms of fireproofness. So I'm primed to think, oh, I need to look at children's recalls. This is something I should be worried about. So I'm going to go online and I'm going to look up this stuff. And it's triggering me to go into the media to sort of do a response based on what the media is telling me. So it's priming me to do stuff. It's priming me to think in a certain way and to cognitively understand something in a certain way. If the media is talking about cholesterol and eggs, and they continually talk up to maybe HSUS, I'm primed to think that they are an expert in this topic. But again, priming can be very short-lived as it changes from story to story. We also see a theory that sort of is used with agenda setting and priming very often is the idea of framing. And you'll see a lot, even more agricultural studies of framing, because people want to understand how the media is setting that agenda, but how are they actually portraying that agenda. So how do they frame something? And framing is sort of the activities of media. So what do they emphasize? What do they select? Who do they talk to? What do they ignore? How do they frame reality? And what do they focus reality on? And are they misframing things? For example, we did a study on the citrus canker issue in Florida several years ago, looking at newspapers in terms of framing. How did they frame the issue of citrus canker? What were some of the frames they were worrying about? And a lot of it was sort of the homeowner frame of you're tearing down my tree that I've had this tree since my kids were little, or the government frame of how the government is becoming involved and going in and making people tear down their trees that were citrus trees in their backyard. So what is the media framing? How are they saying what's most important? And so some of this is by the facts that they use, the sentence structure that they use. There's a Hawkeye-Laurie sort of model that people will use where they look at news bias and how that affects framing of the story. As I said, it could be sources, it could be the images that they're showing with it, the facts that they use. All of this can frame the topic. So we're setting the agenda and priming somebody to think about something, and we're setting it based on the way we want it framed. So some of the critics say, what forms the frame? Is it the reporter and their understanding of media? Is it the news organization? So if it is Fox News, are they framing their news in a certain way versus CNN framing their news in a certain way versus MSNBC? So who is framing that? And then how do we determine if a frame is a misframe or a correct frame? Everybody has those different opinions. So we really think about framing. And those are some of the effects media can have. There's more, but these are sort of the big ones that we tend to see in agricultural communications and sort of that applied field. Like I said, next time I really want to look more at media uses. How do we use media to not only satisfy our needs and our understanding of the world, but is it really that magic bullet theory? Is it really the media who tells us what to think? Or is it us using the media? So till next time, I will talk to you later.